Hi everyone, my name is Gene Richards, an attorney from the Williams Law Group. Welcome back to the Navigating DCPP podcast. On last week's episode, we discussed when the state or when DCPP gets involved. What triggers their involvement? What triggers a report or a referral of child abuse or neglect? Who makes those calls, and why do they make those calls? And most importantly, how can we help someone who is faced with those anonymous reports of child abuse and neglect? On today's episode, we're going to speak about what happens next, how to face the process of DCPP becoming involved in your life and the life of your family. Now, before I begin, I want to reiterate that no information that we share in this podcast will create an attorney-client relationship. But we do welcome any person involved with DCPP or the Child Welfare Agency to contact our firm for a confidential consultation with our team. So, how does the process begin? When a referral comes in, when a report of allegations of neglect or abuse are made to DCPP, what then happens? So, when a call is made to DCPP, there is an intake assessment or a screening summary. This intake worker from DCPP, this person who screens the call, will write down who called, although they don't share that with you, and then what that reporter said. What are the allegations? When are the allegations from? When was the call made? The name of the child in question, the name of the parent or parents in question. There will also be some questions asked of the reporter, like are they aware of any specific allegations of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, of drug use, etc., to figure out, besides what you're telling us now, are there any other potential issues that you as the reporter would be aware of. So once that process begins, the screening summary is completed, there is then the idea as to what should happen next. And you might be thinking, well, Gene, if a call comes in and it's obviously made up or it's obviously there's no merit to the allegations, can't DCPP just leave me alone and not do anything? Well, unfortunately, that's not necessarily true. As you might imagine, DCPP has a policy, has processes to follow, and when a call comes in, they're going to look into the matter and figure out, are the allegations true or not? Because if they don't do anything and something is happening, well, then it's back on them as to why they didn't even look into it or visit the home or talk to the parents. And so any amount of information typically leads to DCPP taking the next appropriate steps in their investigation. So the case gets screened, and depending on the risk factor, right, how serious the allegations are, that would determine how quickly a worker from the division might come to your house, might come to your home. It could be a few hours, it could be a few days. I've seen longer than that even. So if a case is on the higher risk spectrum of cases, you might have the worker try and come to your house immediately. They get a call and they send somebody out right away. For example, if there's allegations of physical abuse or immediate risk of harm or danger. Now, if a case is much lower risk, then perhaps it may be a day or two or more until a worker tries to reach out to you or come to your home. For example, maybe your child missed classes, missed school. There's perhaps a referral that the child is coming to school with dirty clothes or poor hygiene, things that are of concern perhaps, but not of a serious nature like physical abuse, bruising, injuries, things like that. And so if a case is very emergent, for example, and this call comes in after business hours or over the weekend, you might even have a different worker come to your house called a SPRU worker or a Special Response Unit worker. These are workers from DCPP that fill in after hours, holidays, weekends. And so if a call comes in Friday at 10 p.m., with a serious allegation of perhaps physical abuse, bruising, an injury, a SPRU worker might and will try and come to your house that very evening, 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. They're not going to wait until Monday at 9 a.m. to try and visit your home. So after this call comes in, it gets assigned to the worker to come to your house, the sprue worker, the normal case worker, to figure out, now that a call came in, we have this screening summary, these alleged incidents in question. Let's figure out now, are they true or are they not? So there are a lot of issues with the way the system works. First of all, right, the person who screens the calls is a human being, and it's really a bit subjective as to what's a serious concern or not. Now, there's common sense, right? If there's a weapon in the home and something's happening in that immediate moment, yes, it's very severe. But there's a lot of cases that are more in a gray area. Is this allegation of a serious concern or not? Should they send a sprue worker to your house right away or not? Can this wait until Monday morning? Can this wait until a different day? So this person who screens the calls has a lot of power, perhaps, in a way to determine how to label the call. There's a CPS, a Child Protective Service call. There's a CWS, a Child Welfare Service call. And there is an RI, which is a related information call. And that deals with cases that are already open. There's already an open investigation, and perhaps another call comes in with additional information. But a lot of this is based on what the screener determines it to be. They determine how serious it is, how urgent it is, or how to label or define the call that does come in. So the system, like most systems, is very flawed. In terms of what would we do, how would we address the system to make it better for a client of ours? Well, I'll give you an example. We've had many cases that may be deemed severe and may be deemed to be somewhat laughable, almost, why are we even here? And the best way to proactively address this situation, the process of the intake assessment, the screening summary, the response time, the assignment to a caseworker, is for us to jump in on the case as quickly as possible. We send a letter of representation to the specific DCPP local office that is handling your case to address the issue at hand and to advise the division and their attorney that although perhaps your intake worker or your screener thinks this is a very serious concern, here's why this case is not. And I'll give you a brief example of a case that I've had where there was a call that came in, and DCPP found it to be so urgent they came by rather quickly, which they often do. I mean, they want to do their due diligence, see the kids, see the home, talk to the parents. A call came in about there being essentially dog pet feces around the house, all over the house, clutter, bottles in the home, medication bottles around the home, just clutter, dirty, danger, essentially was the allegation. And going back to our last episode, in this situation, we figured out who made the call based on the process of elimination and based on things that had happened prior to the call coming in. So we send our letter of representation to the specific DCPP local office and advise their attorney, look, here's why this case is not all that serious. Here's why the allegations in this case are untrue. By prefacing and giving context to the allegations in the case, it caused DCPP to somewhat relax, to calm down. This isn't a case where you have to come barging in, maybe calling the police, trying to come into the home. There's not an urgency to this case. There's no immediate danger, even if perhaps there was some clutter or there was some dog feces somewhere in the house. And so the division, upon us providing context as to who called, why they called, again, going back to our last episode, and then context as to really what the allegations are saying here and why they aren't that concerning, and also to address the immediate concerns, we sent even the division pictures of the home, showing that, look, there's no clutter here. You don't see any pet feces around the house. Like, the photos speak for themselves. And so by being proactive and talking with the division's attorney, by sending them evidence up front to say, look, here's proof that this case is not of concern and can be dealt with perhaps a little bit more down the road, or even not at all to some degree, the division backed off, they relaxed. They still made their visit to the home. They still spoke with the parents at some point and spoke with the kids at some point. But the urgency and the severity of the case that was perhaps initially thought of, once we jumped in, talked with their attorney, sent them some evidence, perhaps that need for a quick response time and that level of severity had decreased significantly. And so we have to really be proactive when it comes to these cases, because once a call comes in, the division can move very quickly. And so by having a lawyer, by having us on your team, specifically our office, we tend to know, and actually really just do know, every DAG in the state. We know the players, we know the offices. As you already might know, DCP&P has several offices in New Jersey, I believe 50 plus. Each county has from one office to, I think the highest is in Essex, which may have 8 separate offices. And so there are a lot of different offices at play. So based upon where you reside, which county, which part of that county, that would determine which local office from DCP&P is assigned to your case. When that call comes in, who is it transferred to? Who is it assigned to? Which worker in that office? Which DAG in that office? And because we deal with DCP&P from south, the lowest part of South Jersey to the highest part of North Jersey, and I've dealt with every single DAG in the state of New Jersey, we know who to go to and how to get to them. For example, in the case I just mentioned to you, I knew that DAG from other cases. I would see that DAG in court. I have several active cases with that DAG when that case was opened I'm referring to. And so having that relationship, having that prior experience allowed us to have an appropriate conversation and in some way try and extinguish the concerns and the worries of DCP&P. And as you might imagine, if we can cause DCP&P to be less concerned or less urgent to do certain things, it also keeps you as the client a bit more at peace and relaxed, knowing that you have somebody who is in control of the situation. So going back to kind of, I guess, why do we have a reputation in these cases, right? I mentioned these calls coming in, the screener determining somewhat subjectively how serious it is, when to send somebody, who to send, how to send them, because we tend to have a working relationship with the DAGs out of each and every DCP&P local office. It allows us to jump in quickly. Because if you don't know who to speak with, which office to send your letter to, which DAG to call or to email, time begins to tick. Every hour, really every minute, every day that passes by, that may lead to DCP&P taking further action, stopping by your home more often, demanding they let you in, saying if you don't let us in, we're going to take you to court. If you don't let us in, we're going to call the police to have them help us get in. If you don't let us in, we're going to remove your children from your care. These are things that workers say, even more so when they don't think you have an attorney. And so it's important to have an attorney who knows DCP&P jump in right away to have a conversation with their attorney, the appropriate attorney, and say, look, this case, first of all, the allegations aren't true, and the allegations aren't all that severe, and here's why. So the sooner we jump in and sort of change the storyline, provide context to DCP&P, the smoother the case will go. I talked last week about providing context to DCP&P, which allowed them to sort of let their guard down and not have the preconceived notion that our client was a bad person, our client was an abuser, or was not an abuser. In that same line of thinking, when it comes to this part of the case as well, same concept. DCP&P gets a call. They're probably going to assume, wow, this parent or these parents are trouble. This home is unsafe, because they're reading one side of the story. If we jump in when that referral comes in, okay, this home isn't unsafe. We can step back, reevaluate it, and do an investigation. We want to have the leverage. We want to provide schedules and when we can perhaps meet with them, if at all, right? So it allows us to kind of take the reins of the case. We want to have the control. We want to have the power over the investigation, not have DCP&P run the show. We want to be in control of the situation to give you and your family a sense of control and a sense of peace in a very difficult situation. So I do want to thank you all once again for jumping into this podcast, downloading it, pushing the play button. I do this because I want to be able to help people with information, but also give them the resources of where to go and how to get there. And so please, if you know somebody else who might be in need of DCPP information or assistance or representation, share the podcast, share information to Williams Law Group. Give us a call at 908-810-1083. Visit our website, visit our social media on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Whatever it takes to get resources from us, please share, subscribe, send to family and friends. I just want as many people as possible to get an understanding as to who DCPP is and how to best address them when they are involved in your life and the lives of your families. Now, just to quickly summarize the episode today, right? We talked about how to face the process of DCPP getting involved. When a referral comes in, when the screener receives the call, they decide how to label the phone call, they decide how to respond to the referral. Which worker, sprue worker after hours or somebody else to come by the house. And a lot of decisions are made as soon as that call comes in, right? Because when that call comes in, that screener is taking notes, writing things down, typing things down. So that screening summary, which is typically, if you're in court with DCPP, it's the first piece of evidence, the first exhibit that DCPP uses in a trial. So from the get-go, we're having exhibits processed, having exhibits created. And so it is vital that as soon as a referral comes in, as soon as you are aware of a referral coming in, that you contact an attorney, you contact us to jump in right away and proactively address the issue at hand. Because if not, things tend to get ugly very quickly. The longer you wait to have counsel, the longer DCPP will attempt to pressure, bully, perhaps threaten you to do things that you don't actually have to do. Now, next week's episode, again, please join me for that, will be about what happens after the screening summary comes in, right? So now a screening summary came in. Now that perhaps a worker was assigned to come to the home, the screener determined what level of severity the case was. Well, guess what? Now a DCPP worker is going to come knocking on your door. And so when that worker from DCPP knocks on your door, what do you do? That's a big question that clients often ask me, either before or after. It's a huge question that I get often from clients or potential clients. So please join me next week for that episode on what to do when the caseworker knocks. Until then, have a great week, and I will see you all on the podcast then.